The rust-colored dust of Nova Appalachia swirled lazily in the afternoon heat as Astrid Murphy wiped her brow with the back of a grease-stained hand. The repair shop's ventilation system had failed again, and the temperature inside the corrugated metal structure had climbed to nearly unbearable levels. Still, she kept working. The ancient moisture evaporator on her workbench wouldn't fix itself, and the Henderson family who owned it couldn't afford to replace it. Without it, their hydroponics garden would wither within days. "You're just like your father," came her mother's voice from the doorway. Elena Murphy stood with her arms crossed, her weathered face a mixture of pride and concern. "Always putting everyone else's needs ahead of your own." Astrid didn't look up from her work. "Someone has to, and the Hendersons need water more than I need comfort." "You need to rest sometimes, Astrid. It's been 6 months since—" Her mother's voice trailed off. 6 months since they'd found her father's body in the ruins of a crashed corporate shuttle. 6 months since the official inquiry had ruled it pilot error. 6 months of whispers that Marcus Murphy, the most talented mechanic in 3 systems, had somehow failed to notice a critical flaw in the shuttle's navigation system. "I'm fine, Mom," Astrid said, tightening a final connection on the evaporator. She activated the power cell, and the machine hummed to life, its collection funnel beginning to rotate slowly. "See? Good as new." Elena's retort was cut short by a deafening roar that shook the shop's foundations. Both women rushed outside, shielding their eyes against the sudden blast of dust and debris. Above them, descending through Nova Appalachia's hazy atmosphere, was a ship unlike any Astrid had ever seen in person, though she recognized it immediately. "Is that—" her mother began. "The Quantum Sovereign," Astrid breathed, "Lord Kale's flagship." The vessel was massive, easily 10 times the size of the colony's largest building. Its hull gleamed with a pearlescent sheen that seemed to shift colors as it caught the light. But even from this distance, Astrid could see something was wrong. The ship's descent was uneven, its starboard stabilizers firing in irregular bursts. A trail of iridescent particles streamed from its aft section, quantum drive exhaust that should have been contained within the ship's energy recycling systems. "It's damaged," she said, her mechanic's instincts kicking in. "Badly." "What's someone like Lord Varian Kale doing all the way out here?" Elena wondered aloud. "Nova Appalachia isn't exactly on the grand tour of the galaxy." Astrid had no answer. Lord Kale was one of the wealthiest beings in charted space, an Altarian whose family had controlled the quantum drive monopoly for 3 generations. His kind rarely ventured to frontier colonies like Nova Appalachia, preferring the gleaming metropolises of the core worlds. The ship continued its labored descent toward the colony's landing pad, a flat expanse of reinforced concrete originally designed for supply freighters, not luxury flagships. Astrid watched as the vessel's landing struts extended, compensating for the uneven thrust. Despite its obvious damage, the ship touched down with surprising grace. "I'm going to check it out," Astrid said, already moving toward her hoverbike. "Astrid, wait!" her mother called. "This isn't our business. Lord Kale will have his own engineers." But Astrid was already mounting the bike. "I just want to see it up close. Mom, how often does a quantum flagship land in our backyard?" Before her mother could protest further, Astrid gunned the engine and sped toward the landing pad, leaving a trail of dust in her wake. By the time she arrived, a small crowd had already gathered. Nova Appalachia might be a backwater, but news traveled fast in a colony of just 5,000 souls. The ship loomed over them, even more impressive up close. The hull's pearlescent material seemed almost alive, rippling with colors that shouldn't exist in nature. A ramp extended from the ship's underside, and a procession began to descend. First came a pair of security drones, their sensor arrays sweeping the crowd. Next were a half-dozen beings in matching uniforms, crew members, Astrid assumed. And finally, flanked by 2 more ornately decorated figures, came Lord Varian Kale himself. Astrid had seen Altarians before, but never one so elaborately adorned. Kale stood nearly 7 feet tall, his 4 arms draped in shimmering fabrics that caught the light like liquid metal. His skin had the characteristic pale blue tint of his species, but was adorned with intricate patterns of gold leaf that followed the contours of his elongated skull. His 3 eyes, 2 set normally and a third in the center of his forehead, were different colors: azure, emerald, and amber. Colonists of Nova Appalachia. Kale's voice boomed, enhanced by some unseen amplification device. I am Lord Varian Kale, Director General of Quantum Dynamics Universal, and master of the vessel before you, the Quantum Sovereign. A murmur passed through the crowd. Most had recognized him already, but the formal introduction seemed to confirm that this wasn't some strange dream. I am in need of your colony's assistance. Kale continued, his tone making it clear that he considered this beneath him. My flagship has suffered an unexpected malfunction in its primary quantum drive. We require repairs before continuing our journey. Colony Administrator Jorgen pushed his way to the front of the crowd. Lord Kale, we're honored by your presence, but I'm afraid Nova Appalachia lacks the facilities to service a quantum flagship. The nearest quantum-certified shipyard is in the Procyon system. 3 weeks' journey at standard speed. Kale's expression darkened. I am aware of your colony's limitations, Administrator. However, my ship cannot make it to Procyon in its current state. The quantum drive must be repaired here. But my lord, Jorgen protested, we don't have the equipment or expertise. Your colony profile indicates you have a registered mechanics shop. Kale interrupted, consulting a holographic display that materialized from a device on one of his wrists. Owned by one Marcus Murphy. Astrid felt her heart skip a beat at the mention of her father's name. Marcus Murphy is dead. Someone in the crowd called out. Died in a shuttle crash 6 months ago. Kale's 3 eyes narrowed. I see. That is unfortunate. His credentials indicated significant experience with quantum technology. The shop still operates, Administrator Jorgen said quickly. His daughter runs it now, but she's young and... I'm right here, Astrid found herself saying, stepping forward before she could think better of it. I'm Astrid Murphy. All eyes turned to her, including Kale's tricolored gaze. She suddenly became acutely aware of her appearance, coveralls stained with grease and dust, hair hastily tied back, face smudged with grime. You? Kale said, his tone somewhere between amusement and disdain. You are Marcus Murphy's successor? Astrid straightened her spine. I am. I've been running Murphy's mechanics since my father's death. One of the beings flanking Kale, a slender Altarian with silver markings instead of gold, leaned forward and whispered something in his ear. Kale's expression shifted to one of undisguised condescension. My chief engineer, Lyrics, informs me that our ship's diagnostics show no record of any quantum-grade repairs being performed at your establishment in the past 5 years. That's because no one on Nova Appalachia can afford quantum technology. Astrid replied, but my father taught me everything he knew, including quantum systems. Kale's upper lip curled slightly. Did he now? And have you ever personally repaired a quantum drive, young Murphy? Astrid hesitated. No, but... As I suspected. Kale interrupted. Lyrics, contact Procyon shipyards. We'll have to arrange for a repair team to be dispatched to us. That will take at least 2 weeks, my lord, Lyrics replied. And cost? I'm aware of the cost, Kale snapped. But it seems we have no choice, unless... His gaze returned to Astrid, and a strange glint appeared in his 3 eyes. Unless the young mechanic would care to prove her inherited expertise. Astrid felt a chill despite the planet's heat. What do you mean? Kale's 4 hands spread in an elaborate gesture. A challenge, Miss Murphy. I dare you to repair my ship's quantum drive. A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. My lord, Lyrics protested, the quantum drive is incredibly complex, and if improperly handled. Yes, catastrophic failure, potential rupture in space-time. We're all aware of the risks. Kale dismissed with a wave. But what is life without a little danger? He turned back to Astrid. What say you, daughter of Murphy? Do you accept my challenge? Astrid felt her mouth go dry. This was insane. She had studied quantum theory. Yes. Her father had walked her through the schematics of drives he'd worked on during his time with the Galactic Fleet, but she'd never actually touched one herself, let alone attempted repairs on a flagship-class quantum engine. But before she could respond, Cale continued. Of course, there would be a wager involved. His voice carried easily across the now silent crowd. If you succeed in repairing my drive, I will grant you any reward within my considerable power to bestow. Credits, technology, a position within my corporation. Name it, and it shall be yours. Astrid swallowed hard. And if I fail? Cale's mouth stretched into what might have been a smile on a human face. On his, it looked predatory. If you fail, you will publicly renounce your family's reputation as mechanics. You will admit that your father's credentials were exaggerated, shall we say? And you will close your shop permanently. The crowd gasped. Murphy's Mechanics had been a fixture on Nova Appalachia since the colony's founding. Her father had built it from nothing, servicing everything from moisture evaporators to interstellar freighters. Don't do it, Astrid, came a voice from the crowd, Thomas Henderson, whose evaporator she'd just repaired. It's not worth the risk. But Astrid wasn't listening to him. She was thinking of her father's body, pulled from the wreckage of that corporate shuttle, of the official inquiry that had blamed him for the crash, of the whispers that had followed her family ever since. I accept, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll repair your quantum drive, Lord Cale. Cale's tricolored eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected her to accept. Then his expression settled back into one of smug confidence. Excellent. You have 3 days, Miss Murphy. My crew will provide you access to the engine room and any tools you require. He turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Miss Murphy, do try not to destroy my ship. It's rather expensive. With that, he and his entourage retreated back up the ramp, leaving Astrid standing alone before the crowd of colonists, wondering what she had just gotten herself into. The news spread through Nova Appalachia like wildfire. By the time Astrid returned to the shop, her mother was waiting, her face pale with worry. Have you lost your mind? Elena demanded. A quantum drive. Astrid, your father worked on military-grade quantum systems, and even he would hesitate to take on a flagship drive without proper facilities. I know what I'm doing, Mom, Astrid said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. She began gathering tools, sorting through her father's old equipment cases for specialized instruments she'd never had occasion to use. No, you don't, her mother countered. This is suicide, or worse. If that drive malfunctions during your repairs, half the colony could be wiped out. Astrid paused, a rare quantum resonance spanner in her hand. I'll be careful. I'm not going to rush anything. This isn't about being careful. It's about that arrogant Altarian setting you up to fail. Elena's voice cracked. I've already lost your father. I can't lose you too. Astrid set down the spanner and embraced her mother. You won't lose me, and I won't fail. How can you be so sure? Astrid pulled back, meeting her mother's tear-filled eyes. Because Dad taught me to listen. Elena's expression softened. His old saying. Astrid nodded. Listen to what the machine sings. That's how he could fix things no one else could. He didn't just look at the diagnostics or follow the manuals. He listened to the way engines hummed, the way circuitry buzzed. He could hear problems that instruments couldn't detect. And you think you can do the same with an alien quantum drive? I have to try. Mom. This isn't just about Lord Cale's challenge. It's about Dad, about clearing his name. Astrid picked up the spanner again, its crystalline head catching the light. If I can prove I can fix a quantum flagship, then maybe people will stop believing he was responsible for that crash. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed and began helping Astrid gather tools. Your father would be proud of you, she said softly, and terrified. I know, Astrid replied. That's how I know I'm on the right track. The Quantum Sovereign's engine room was unlike anything Astrid had ever seen. The The chamber was vast, easily the size of the colony's central plaza, and dominated by the quantum drive itself, a massive crystalline structure suspended in a web of iridescent filaments. The crystal pulsed with inner light, shifting colors that seemed to follow patterns just beyond the edge of comprehension. Lyrix, Kale's chief engineer, stood beside her, his expression making it clear he considered her presence an affront to his professional dignity. "This is a QDU Series 9 Infinite Horizon drive," he said, his tone clipped. "The most advanced quantum propulsion system ever created. There are only 12 in existence, and this is the only one installed on a private vessel." "It's beautiful," Astrid said honestly. Lyrix seemed taken aback by her sincerity. "Yes. Well, beauty and function are inseparable in true engineering." He gestured to a control panel. "The diagnostics show a cascade failure in the resonance matrix, but we've been unable to isolate the exact cause." Astrid approached the panel, studying the holographic displays. The alien script was unfamiliar, but the mechanical principles behind it were universal enough. "How long has it been malfunctioning?" "The irregularities began approximately 72 hours ago, during our passage through the Cygnus Rift. Initially, they were minor. Efficiency dropped by perhaps 2%. But the problem has been escalating. Current efficiency is down to 63% and falling." Astrid frowned. "That's a steep decline. Have you tried recalibrating the harmonic stabilizers?" Lyrix gave her a look that might have been surprise. "Of course, that was the first procedure attempted." "And the quantum field integrity? Any fluctuations there?" "Minimal, within accepted parameters." Lyrix's tone had lost some of its condescension. "The issue appears to be with the resonance crystal itself, but our diagnostics can't penetrate the inner matrix." Astrid nodded, studying the massive crystal. According to her father's teachings, a quantum drive's resonance crystal was its heart, the component that allowed it to manipulate the fabric of space-time. A flaw in the crystal could indeed cause the symptoms the ship was experiencing. "I'll need to see the maintenance logs," she said, "and I want to run my own diagnostic sequence." Lyrix hesitated. "The maintenance protocols are proprietary. Lord Kale was clear that you could attempt repairs, but sharing corporate secrets is another matter." Astrid turned to face him fully. "I can't fix what I can't understand. Either I get full access, or I walk away now and Lord Kale can wait for his repair team from Procyon." For a moment, she thought Lyrix would refuse. Then he sighed. "I'll speak with Lord Kale, but don't touch anything until I return." Once Lyrix had left, Astrid approached the quantum crystal. Up close, its complexity was even more apparent. The crystal wasn't a single structure, but rather thousands of smaller crystalline elements, each perfectly aligned with its neighbors. The light within pulsed in patterns that seemed almost musical in their rhythm. "What are you singing?" Astrid whispered to the crystal. She closed her eyes and simply listened. At first, there was only the background hum of the ship's systems: life support, gravity generators, power distribution. But gradually, she began to isolate the sound of the quantum drive itself. It wasn't a single note, but a chord, complex and ever-shifting. And within that chord was a discordant element, a sour note that didn't belong. Her eyes snapped open. The problem wasn't with the entire crystal, it was localized to a specific section, the lower quadrant nearest to the power coupling. When Lyrix returned, accompanied by Lord Kale himself, Astrid was already setting up her diagnostic equipment. "Miss Murphy," Kale said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I understand you're demanding access to proprietary information. I'm demanding the tools I need to do the job you challenged me to do." Astrid replied without looking up. "Unless you want me to resort to guesswork with your multi-billion credit quantum drive?" Kale's eyes narrowed. "Lyrix tells me you've already formed some theories." Now Astrid did look up. "The problem is in the lower quadrant of the resonance crystal, near the primary power coupling. Something's disrupting the harmonic flow in that specific section." Lyrix looked startled. "Our diagnostics haven't been able to localize the issue that precisely." "Your diagnostics aren't listening properly," Astrid said. The crystal is singing out of tune, but only in one section. Kale and Lyrics exchanged a glance. Singing, Kale repeated, a hint of amusement in his voice. It's a metaphor, Astrid said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. My father taught me that machines communicate in their own way. You just have to learn how to listen. Charming, Kale said, in a tone that suggested he found it anything but. Very provincial. But I suppose if it helps you conceptualize the problem. He waved a hand dismissively. Lyrics, give her the access she needs. I want this resolved quickly. After they left, Astrid turned back to her work. With full access to the ship's systems, she began a thorough analysis of the quantum drive's performance history. The logs confirmed what she'd already suspected. The problem had begun suddenly, not gradually as would be expected from normal wear and tear or component failure. For the next several hours, she lost herself in the work, tracing power flows, analyzing resonance patterns, and mapping the crystal's structure. She barely noticed when Lyrics returned with a meal, or when a small group of colonists came to watch her work through the engine room's observation window. It was well past midnight when she found it, a tiny anomaly in the crystal's structure. A fracture so small it was barely visible, even under magnification. But its position was critical, directly in the path of the main power flow to the lower quadrant. Got you, she murmured. But as she studied the fracture more closely, something didn't add up. The break was too clean, too precise. Natural crystal fractures were jagged, irregular. This looked almost like a cut, she whispered. Someone deliberately damaged the crystal. The realization sent a chill through her. This wasn't a malfunction. It was sabotage. But who would sabotage Lord Kale's flagship? And why? The question swirled in her mind as she continued her analysis, trying to determine if there were other areas of damage she'd missed. By dawn, she had a complete picture of the problem and a potential solution. The sabotage was limited to that single, precise cut, designed to create a cascading failure that would strand the ship far from help. Repairing it would require redirecting the power flow around the damaged section and using a carefully calibrated energy pulse to reseal the fracture. She was making final calculations when the engine room door slid open and Lord Kale entered, accompanied by Lyrics and several other crew members. Well, Miss Murphy, Kale demanded. It's been 24 hours. Have you made any progress, or shall we continue arrangements with Procyon shipyards? Astrid straightened, wincing as her stiff muscles protested. I've identified the problem and developed a repair procedure. Kale's eyebrows rose. Indeed? And what, pray tell, is this problem that has confounded my chief engineer and his entire team? Astrid hesitated. Accusing someone of sabotage without proof beyond her own observations was dangerous, especially when the victim was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The resonance crystal has a fracture, she said carefully. A very small, very precise fracture in the lower quadrant, exactly where the power coupling connects to the main matrix. Lyrics frowned. That's impossible. Our scans would have detected structural damage to the crystal. Not if the fracture was created in a way that makes it nearly invisible to standard diagnostics. Astrid countered. It's positioned at exactly the right angle to appear as a normal facet of the crystal's structure. May I see this mysterious fracture? Kale asked, his tone making it clear he remained skeptical. Astrid led them to the diagnostic station and pulled up the enhanced scan she'd been running. There, she said, pointing to a minuscule line in the three-dimensional model. It's only visible under extreme magnification and specific lighting conditions. Lyrics leaned in, his expression shifting from doubt to shock. By the void, he murmured. She's right. That shouldn't be there. Kale's three eyes narrowed as he studied the display. And you believe you can repair this? Yes, Astrid said. But I'll need to reroute power from the main coupling and generate a precisely calibrated energy pulse to fuse the crystal back together. It's delicate work, and there's significant risk. If the pulse is too weak, the fracture will remain. If it's too strong, the entire crystal could shatter. The consequences of which would be unpleasant, Kale said dryly. Catastrophic would be a better word, Astrid corrected. At minimum, the drive would be destroyed. At worst, it could create a localized quantum rupture, which would vaporize this ship and a significant portion of your charming little colony. Kale finished. He studied Astrid for a long moment. You seem remarkably calm for someone proposing such a hazardous procedure. Astrid met his gaze steadily. My father always said that fear has no place in an engine room. It makes your hands shake, and shaky hands make mistakes. Something flickered in Kale's tri-colored eyes. A hint of respect? Perhaps? A wise philosophy. Very well, Miss Murphy. Proceed with your repairs. Lyrics will provide whatever assistance you require. Actually, Astrid said, I'd prefer to work alone for this part. Too many people in the critical zone increases the risk of interference with the energy pulse. Kale seemed about to object, then nodded. As you wish. But I expect regular updates on your progress. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Miss Murphy? I've arranged a small gathering tomorrow evening to witness the results of your efforts. I do hope you won't disappoint my guests. After they left, Astrid returned to her preparations with renewed focus. The repair itself would be relatively simple. The challenge was in the precision required. She spent hours calibrating her equipment, running simulations, and calculating power levels down to the last decimal place. As evening approached, she found herself thinking of her father. He had worked on quantum systems during his time with the Galactic Fleet, and his stories had fascinated her as a child. One in particular came to mind now, a tale of a malfunctioning quantum relay on a frontier outpost. The engineers had been at it for days, her father had told her, running every diagnostic in the book, replacing components, recalibrating systems. Nothing worked. Finally, they called me in. Know what I did first? What? Young Astrid had asked, eyes wide. I shut down all the diagnostics, all the computers, all the fancy equipment, and I just listened. He'd tapped his ear. The relay was making a sound, a high-pitched whine so faint most people didn't notice it, but that whine told me everything I needed to know. The problem wasn't in the components they'd been replacing, it was in the power regulator, a tiny crack that was causing energy to leak out as sound waves. How did you fix it? She'd asked. Her father had smiled. I sang back to it. At the time, she'd thought he was joking. But as she grew older and he taught her more about mechanics, she came to understand what he meant. Every machine had its own rhythm, its own frequency. Sometimes, the solution wasn't about forcing a machine to conform to specifications, but about finding the harmony that would allow it to function as it was meant to. Now, staring at the fractured quantum crystal, she wondered if the same principle might apply here. She worked through the night, making final adjustments to her repair procedure. By morning, she was ready. As she prepared the energy pulse generator, Lyrics arrived to check on her progress. Lord Kale's guests are arriving, he informed her. The demonstration is scheduled for noon. Astrid nodded, not looking up from her work. I'll be ready. Lyrics hesitated, then said in a lower voice, No one has ever attempted a field repair on a quantum crystal before. The risk? I know the risk, Astrid interrupted. But there's no other option if Lord Kale wants his ship fixed anytime soon. There's something else you should know, Lyrics said, glancing around as if to ensure they weren't overheard. That fracture? You were right. It's not natural. Astrid looked up sharply. You're saying it was deliberate? Sabotage? Lyrics nodded grimly. I've been reviewing the security logs. 3 days ago, before the malfunction began, an engineering team from Quantum Dynamics' rival corporation, Starfire Technologies, was granted access to perform a routine inspection. They're the only ones who had access to the crystal housing during that time frame. Why would Lord Kale allow competitors to inspect his ship? Regulatory compliance. Even Lord Kale must abide by Galactic Safety Commission rules, which require periodic third-party inspections of all quantum drives. Lyrics' expression darkened. But the timing is too convenient to be coincidence. Astrid's mind raced. Corporate sabotage would explain the precision of the fracture and why it had been so difficult to detect. Does Lord Kale know? I've informed him of my suspicions. He's displeased. Lyric studied her for a moment. I didn't think you'd actually find the problem, let alone develop a viable repair solution. Perhaps there's more of your father in you than I initially believed. Coming from the alien engineer, it was high praise indeed. Thank you, Astrid said, but I haven't fixed anything yet. No. Lyrics agreed. But you've already accomplished more than anyone expected. He turned to leave, then paused. Your father. He was Marcus Murphy of the Galactic Fleet, wasn't he? The one who developed the quantum stabilization protocol for the Orion-class battleships? Astrid nodded, surprised. You knew of him? Any quantum engineer worth their certification knows that name. Lyrics's expression was unreadable. His work on harmonic resonance integration is still taught at the Academy. If he were alive, he'd have recognized this sabotage immediately. With that, he left, leaving Astrid alone with her thoughts and the damaged quantum crystal. By noon, the engine room had been transformed. A section of the bulkhead had been converted into a viewing area, complete with comfortable seating for Lord Kale's guests, a mix of his crew and Nova Appalachia's more prominent citizens. Administrator Jorgen was there, along with the heads of the Mining Guild and Agricultural Cooperative. Astrid's mother stood to one side, her face tight with worry. Lord Kale himself sat in an ornate chair at the center of the viewing area, resplendent in even more elaborate garments than before. His tri-colored gaze fixed on Astrid as she made her final preparations. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored guests, Kale announced, his voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. You are about to witness either a triumph of frontier ingenuity or a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris. Miss Murphy has claimed she can repair my ship's quantum drive, a feat that typically requires a fully equipped shipyard and a team of certified engineers. Murmurs ran through the assembled spectators. Astrid could feel their eyes on her, some curious, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. The colony's established mechanics, who had dismissed her father's teachings as exaggerated and had predicted her shop's failure after his death, seemed particularly eager to see her fail. Miss Murphy, Kale continued, whenever you're ready, do try not to destroy my ship, or your colony. Astrid took a deep breath, centering herself. The repair procedure she'd devised was complex, with multiple stages that had to be executed in perfect sequence. First, she would reroute power around the damaged section of the crystal. Then, she would generate the energy pulse to repair the fracture. Finally, she would gradually restore the normal power flow, allowing the crystal to stabilize. She moved to the main control panel and began the sequence, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Displays flickered and changed as she redirected power flows, bypassing safety protocols that would normally prevent such operations. Power rerouted, she announced, beginning phase 2. This was the most critical part. The energy pulse had to be precise, strong enough to fuse the crystal, but not so strong that it caused further damage. She'd calculated the optimal frequency and duration based on the crystal's resonant properties, but there was an element of intuition involved as well. As she prepared the pulse generator, she remembered her father's words. Listen to what the machine sings. Closing her eyes briefly, Astrid focused on the sound of the quantum drive, the discordant note created by the fracture. Then she adjusted the pulse frequency, not to the mathematically optimal value her calculations had produced, but to a slightly different one that seemed to harmonize with the crystal's current state. Energy pulse prepared, she said. Initiating in 3, 2, 1. She activated the generator, a beam of pure energy, so bright it was painful to look at directly, lanced from the emitter to the precise point in the crystal where the fracture was located. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the crystal began to glow, the light within it intensifying until the entire engine room was bathed in its radiance. Astrid watched the readings carefully, adjusting the pulse strength as needed. The fracture was beginning to close, the edges melting together under the carefully controlled energy. But something wasn't right. The crystal's resonance was changing in an unexpected way, shifting toward a frequency she hadn't anticipated. Following her instinct, Astrid adjusted the pulse again, matching it to the crystal's new resonance. The repair continued, the fracture closing millimeter by millimeter. And as it did, the discordant note in the crystal's song began to fade, replaced by a purer, more harmonious tone. Finally, the last trace of the fracture disappeared. Astrid terminated the energy pulse and began the process of restoring normal power flow to the repaired section of the crystal. The drive's humming changed, growing stronger and more stable as full power was restored. "Final diagnostic sequence initiating," she announced, her voice steady despite the tension that had built in her shoulders during the delicate procedure. The holographic displays filled with data as the ship's systems evaluated the repair. Green indicators began to light up one by one as each subsystem reported normal function. Finally, the main status indicator flashed and turned a brilliant emerald. "Quantum drive restored to 100% efficiency," Astrid said, allowing herself a small smile. "Repair complete." There was a moment of stunned silence from the viewing area. Even Lord Kale seemed at a loss for words, his three eyes wide as he stared at the displays confirming what Astrid had just announced. Then Lyric stepped forward, running his own diagnostic sequence. "Confirmed," he said, an undercurrent of amazement in his voice. "The crystal integrity is at 100%. The harmonic resonance is actually 2.3% more efficient than factory specifications." Another beat of silence, and then Administrator Jorgen began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound swelling until it filled the engine room. Astrid caught her mother's eye and saw tears of pride streaming down Elelena's face. Lord Kale rose from his chair, his expression inscrutable. He approached Astrid slowly, the crowd parting before him. When he reached her, he studied her for a long moment, his tricolored gaze intense. "It seems," he said finally, his voice carrying easily over the now silent crowd, "that I have underestimated both you and your colony, Miss Murphy." It was as close to an apology as someone of his status was likely to offer. Astrid inclined her head slightly, acknowledging his words without responding directly. "The terms of our wager were clear." Kale continued. "You have succeeded in repairing my ship's quantum drive, a feat that many would have deemed impossible under these conditions. As promised, you may name your reward. And if it is within my power to grant, it shall be yours." Astrid had given this considerable thought during the long hours of her work. At first, she'd considered asking for credits, enough to upgrade her shop, perhaps, or to secure her and her mother's future on this harsh frontier world. But as she'd learned more about the sabotage, another possibility had taken shape in her mind. "I want two things, Lord Kale," she said, her voice clear and confident. "First, I want you to establish a branch of the Quantum Engineering Academy here on Nova Appalachia, with full scholarships for local youth who wish to study advanced mechanics." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. It was an ambitious request, but one that would benefit the entire colony rather than just Astrid herself. Kale's eyebrows rose. "Interesting. Using your boon to benefit your community rather than yourself. Very noble." The words seemed to taste strange on his tongue. "And your second request?" Astrid met his gaze steadily. "I want you to reopen the inquiry into my father's death. The official ruling was pilot error, but I don't believe that's what happened. I think his shuttle was sabotaged, just like your quantum drive." A hush fell over the room. Even Lyrics looked startled by her boldness. "That is a serious accusation," Kale said, his voice low. "What evidence do you have?" "None that would stand up in an official inquiry," Astrid admitted. "Just the fact that my father was the best mechanic I've ever known. He would never have missed a flaw in a navigation system. And the fact that he was working on a prototype quantum relay for your corporation when he died. A project that I believe Starfire Technologies was very interested in." Kale's three eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "The same corporation whose inspection team had access to my ship before the malfunction began." "Yes," Astrid said simply. For a long moment, Kale was silent, his alien features unreadable. Then he nodded once, decisively. Both requests are granted. I shall establish a branch of the academy here, with full funding for local students. And I will personally see to it that your father's death is reinvestigated with all the resources at my disposal. Relief and gratitude washed over Astrid in equal measure. Thank you, Lord Kale. No, Miss Murphy, Kale replied, and for the first time, there was genuine respect in his voice. It is I who should thank you. You have not only saved my ship from a costly delay, but have also brought to light what appears to be a campaign of corporate espionage against my interests. He turned to face the assembled crowd. Let it be known that from this day forward, Nova Appalachia and its people, particularly the Murphy family, have the protection and patronage of House Kale. The implications of his declaration were enormous. Lord Kale's patronage meant resources, technology, and political influence that could transform the struggling colony's fortunes. Furthermore, Kale continued, I wish to offer Miss Murphy a position aboard the Quantum Sovereign as a special consultant on our return journey. Her unique approach to quantum mechanics may prove valuable in identifying other potential vulnerabilities in our systems. It was an opportunity beyond anything Astrid could have imagined. A chance to work with the most advanced technology in charted space, to learn from engineers trained at the galaxy's most prestigious academies, to see worlds she'd only read about in data files. She glanced at her mother, who nodded slightly, tears still glistening in her eyes. I accept, Astrid said, but I'll need to make arrangements for the shop while I'm gone. Of course, Kale agreed. We depart in 3 days, which should give you ample time. He extended one of his 4 hands. Welcome aboard, Consultant Murphy. As Astrid shook his hand, sealing their agreement, she thought of her father. He had always believed that true skill transcended social boundaries, that excellence would eventually be recognized regardless of its origin. Standing in the engine room of a quantum flagship, having accomplished what the experts had deemed impossible, she finally understood what he had meant. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with new technologies to master and prejudices to overcome. But she had proven herself equal to the task. She had listened to what the machines sang, and in doing so, had changed not only her own fate, but that of her entire colony. And somewhere, she was certain, her father was smiling. 6 months later, Nova Appalachia was transformed. The Quantum Engineering Academy satellite campus occupied a gleaming new facility on the edge of the settlement, its quantum communication array a stark contrast to the rugged frontier buildings surrounding it. Students from across the colony, and even a few from neighboring systems, filled its classrooms, learning the principles that Astrid had applied to save Lord Kale's flagship. Murphy's mechanics had not closed in Astrid's absence. Instead, it had expanded, with Elena overseeing a staff of apprentices trained in the basics of the Murphy method. The shop now bore an official certification from Quantum Dynamics Universal, the only repair facility on a frontier world to hold such a distinction. And the inquiry into Marcus Murphy's death had been reopened, with Lord Kale's considerable resources backing the investigation. The evidence of sabotage had been discovered, hidden beneath layers of corrupted data and falsified reports. 3 executives from Starfire Technologies now awaited trial on charges of corporate espionage, sabotage, and murder. Astrid herself had thrived aboard the Quantum Sovereign. Her intuitive approach to quantum mechanics had proved invaluable in identifying weaknesses in the ship's systems, and her frontier ingenuity had impressed even the most skeptical of Kale's engineers. She had visited worlds she'd only dreamed of, the crystalline cities of Alteria Prime, the floating gardens of Elysium, the vast shipyards of Procyon. But now she was home, if only briefly. The Sovereign had returned to Nova Appalachia to formally inaugurate the Academy campus, and Astrid had taken the opportunity to visit her mother and the shop that had started it all. As she stood in the doorway of Murphy's Mechanics, watching a young apprentice carefully disassemble a moisture evaporator under Elena's watchful eye, she felt a presence beside her. Your mother is an excellent teacher, Lyrics observed. The alien engineer had become something of a mentor to Astrid during their travels, his initial disdain having transformed into genuine respect. She has the same gift for explanation that you do. She learned from the same person I did, Astrid replied with a smile. Dad always said that knowing how to do something was only half the battle. Being able to teach others was equally important. Lyrics nodded thoughtfully. A wise philosophy. One that Lord Kale has come to appreciate, I think. That was an understatement. Kale had been so impressed by the results of Astrid's work that he had established a new division within his corporation dedicated to what he called intuitive quantum engineering, an approach that combined traditional technical expertise with the kind of instinctive understanding that Astrid had demonstrated. The ceremony begins in an hour, Lyrics reminded her. Lord Kale expects his chief consultant to be present. Chief consultant. The title still felt strange to Astrid, who less than a year ago had been struggling to keep her father's shop afloat on a backwater colony world. Now she advised one of the wealthiest beings in charted space on matters of quantum technology, her name known in engineering circles across the galaxy. I'll be there, she assured Lyrics. I just wanted to see home again before we leave. The alien engineer nodded in understanding and departed, leaving Astrid alone with her thoughts. She stepped fully into the shop, the familiar smells of machine oil and ozone bringing back memories of countless hours spent at her father's side, learning to listen to what the machines sang. The lessons he had taught her had saved not only Lord Kale's ship, but had transformed her life and the future of her colony. As she ran her hand along a workbench, feeling the worn smoothness of metal that had supported generations of repairs, Astrid Murphy smiled. She had not only preserved her father's legacy, she had expanded it beyond anything he could have imagined. And somewhere in the vast, quantum-entangled universe, she was certain he knew.